By the by, in my continuing allegorical picturization of this being a kind of revolutionary activity, and I've used the term recruit, implying, I assume you understood, people of your general ilk. For those of you sans military experience, I want to point out that I am not being as precise as I could be, because a recruit in the military sense is someone who was drafted. What we should be saying is RAs. In the trade, that's known as regular army. Enlistees as people that went, as strange as it sounds, especially to those who were actually recruited, drafted, that there were people of their, quote, own free will and volition who went and signed up. They are known as RAs, with a certain snarl of the lip, I might add, in some quarters. But that's what I should be saying instead of recruits, because insofar as it appears capable of being verbalized in our 3D world, without us going into any debate as to motivation and all those questions. But insofar as it goes verbally, you are not recruited. No, you enlisted. You volunteered. So you're not recruits, you're RAs, you're regular army. I like to keep things, as you know, precise. Now, where were we? I have in the past asked you, in reference, it appeared, to potentially doing something publicly, you people here and people in other cities. And I've asked you to at least consider, think about, ponder, and realize that if I were to tell you specifically to go out and in some way begin to try and sell this, try and do this publicly, we need to expand it. I have asked you such questions as, would it be easier to market new data like this, or would it be easier to market the apparent source of the data, i.e., a person? Now, I ask you this, as I always do, believe it or not, for reasons other than the superficial, the apparently obvious ones of shining the flashlight at the sun. Is you should have given this some real thought. Would it be easier if I said you have got to go out, it's now your responsibility to go out and we have got to spread this kind of information, we've got to make it more available, and I'll leave it to you as to how to do it. And you should have taken my question, even if it appeared to be rhetorical, and you should have thought, would it be easier to market it either on the basis of the person or the information? Or what if I had said, you've got to go out and you have got to sell, you've got to attempt to market the information. Drop the idea of a person. Just say, well, it's a person and they're not here now. Maybe they'll come back, maybe they won't. But what's important, anyway, this is not some cult here. The person, whoever it was, is not trying for the cover of People magazine or Field and Stream. It's the information's important, all right? I'm sure that all of you believe that you could take some approach, take some shot at that. But what if I said, all right, the most efficient way, or if I gave you no reason, I just said, all right, what you got to do? We'll make up a name for me, and you've got to go out and you begin to market me. Of course, the marketing is going on the basis that I'm not a singer, a dancer, or a painter in this case. I'm somebody that's got all this wonderful new information, these secrets. But you push it on the basis of, God, what a great guy. Anything you want to. How charming, how persuasive, what a great speaker, just an all-around good guy. But you're attempting to market the person as opposed to what the person is saying, the information. You should have done that, but now, can you see that that can be taken to your internal state? On this basis of you, or let me ask you, is it easier for you to picture you as being a new, bought It's something that you purchased, something that you acquired, something that you saw advertised, you heard about, you were marketed. Can you picture any change in you now as being a new person? Is that the way you would picture it? Or could you picture you being fully, or having fully absorbed new information? Did that get too sticky when I turned the corner? Can you take the original question of would it be easier to market a person, be easier to market new information or the apparent source of the information, an individual, a person? Can you see in you that there is a marketing going on? There's a kind of selling process going on. The feeling is with you that you want to change. So to do that in some way, although you've never used these terms and I haven't either, toward your apparent internal operations in this matter, you are attempting, some part of you, to sell some other part of you on change. Is it easier? Or what have you already been doing without it using these terms? But now I'm asking you, since I'm putting the terms, is it easier right now that I ask you for you to picture you selling you? Forget me now, we're taking me out of it, that this is all an internal process of you selling you on a person. That is, the new me, the new Alfonso, the new Brunhilde. That I see me just as a new person, like I had been sold on the idea, or someone attempted to market it to me, that is me, and I just see me. Whatever it would be. I see me 20 pounds lighter. I see me about 3 inches taller. I see me putting on about 5 or 6 inches up here if I was of the right gender. I see me being more talented. I see me looking at least 15 years younger. All that. Would that be what you find to be an acceptable change? That is, a new person. You got marketed and you bought the new person. And that's just it. Or can you picture you, not a new person, not in that sense, not in an observable, describable new person, weight, height, age, but just sort of you, but now you have been marketed and you have bought the information, the new data. Which of those would be to you the easiest? Which to you would be the most useful? Which to you would be the most efficient? What has already been going on before I put these terms on it? What have you taken this to be? What did I apparently intend it to be now that I ask you? Did I intend it to be one or the other? Has it been on such a basis that you could take it almost either way? Another old night. Changing the subject completely. More areas wherein I think that you, once I bring it up, should find it to be topographically curious. So what I'm about to point out, why does it seem to be so? Why does it seem that I can just cover all the possibilities? Why is it that there seems to be, if you know how, a way in which to measure and to count everything in life? And if you got the count, you got it. And if you say, hey, there are only 5 ways to do this, and you say them, you go, Jesus, that is it. If they kill me, I never thought about it, but now that you mention it, there are 5. They're not 4. I can't leave. If I cut one of them, I see the whole. But then again, I can't add another one. Topographically curious. I know not all of you believe that you're hearing why I bring this up periodically and use that term. And so I am prepared someday in the what? Future, to perhaps try and make it even clearer. But not tonight. I'm just going to press on. Another area that you should find topographically curious, and it's this, that there would seem to be, in a certain way, 3 possibilities in a certain way. And the possibilities are this. Now listen. 3 possibilities, not 2, not 4, and certainly not 17, but not 2 or 4. And the possibilities are these. uno, is look what I'm doing, and dos, look what I'm saying, and three, look what I am. That's it. There is no other possibility. Why are they just those three? Not only why are they just those three, why are they three? Why are there three? Why are there those three? Why isn't there one more possibility? But there's not. Look what I'm doing. Look what I'm saying. Look what I am. That's life. I mean, that covers it all the way from garbage collectors to internal revenue collectors, priests, rabbis, scientists. Look what I'm saying, look what I'm doing, look what I am. I have another one. I could say it's a corollary so that you won't think I really jumped somewhere. Inasmuch as in any situation you have got, although it may shift and change, you have got someone apparently being the actor and someone being the audience. Whether we're talking about two people or a group of people. We've been through this, and I've tried to get you to see it is as though everyone is an entertainer and everyone's an audience. All right. If you walked out on the stage, literally and otherwise, you're on the stage whenever you are the apparent performer and someone else, even other people, are the audience. You have got this situation. But if you go on the stage and you're going to perform, literally, allegorically, and you're going to perform in a way that is not limited to, that is not describably immediately as physical. That is, you're not going to dance, you're not going to juggle, you're not going to do pantomime. You're going to do that requires the active use of the yellow circuit. That could be singing, assuming if you were singing original songs. It could be being a comedian, original jokes. Let's just say, in a yellow sense, that you're coming out to perform and it involves talking. Apparently original ideas. Lecture, I guess you'd call it, except that sounds boring. Now we're getting to the, I suggest, additional topographical curiosity. Any performer that's not going to sing, dance, pantomime, stay on their head, tumble, is going to be involved with a form of lecture, singing original songs, poems, jokes, has only three possibilities. Get ready. If you're going to entertain, if you're going to talk, and it's your time to be the entertainer and someone else or some other group is the audience, there are only three things that you can talk about. Three areas, and that's it. Are you ready? Number one is what I've done. Number two is what somebody else has done. Number three, facts. Not two, not four things. That's it. And it's curious to a real RA. Anybody wild-eyed enough, onion-breathed enough to actually enlist in this should find that curious. There are only three ways, only three areas that you can talk about from the stage. But once you got the spotlight, once you are the entertainer, don't worry about the general areas. I'll give them to you. You know them now. You can try to get more specific or worry about what you're going to do in a more individual manner. But whatever you're going to say, whatever is your form of entertainment, is going to fall within one of those three areas. You're going to talk about what you've done, or you're going to talk about what somebody else has done, or you're going to cover facts. Anybody that's really RA, even if they don't find that curious, will find it curious that you don't see it as being curious, and I keep insisting such things are curious. Something else. You're not really RA, you're not really regular Army. Until your daydreams are better, more extraordinary, more outlandish than everybody else's night ones, including your own. Think about that one then. Next subject. If you recall, I brought up some time back that one real description, a defining description, even a one-word description of a real revolutionist would be one who was what? Efficient. An efficiency approach in the city, and I could even use some of this, but in the city, an efficiency approach seems to be based upon, without any doubt, the belief that there is one right way of doing anything. Or else there would be no efficiency. There would be no more efficient approach than another one. That there's got to be one right way of doing something. Now, I said I could use that, except with this addition. If you got in the bushes, then whatever seems to be the one best way of doing something, the opposite is likewise true. It would have to be, to city, binary consciousness, it would have to be the opposite. That once it was determined, and let's say out in the bushes you accepted it, that all right, here is the systematic, the defined, the codified approach to do this task, and here is the most efficient way. Assuming that it's ordinarily possible that you can immediately perceive what would be the absolute, unconditional opposite of that would be likewise as efficient. The fact still remains where I started, that was somewhat an aside, that an efficiency approach does convey the belief that there is one right way of doing something. There is an area that I've only tried to mention to someone once individually, and I'll go ahead and pull it out tonight. The assumption in the city, and where I'm springing it from on us right now, on you would-be enlistees, that even with you there must be a one right way to do any particular thing. One area that I have never mentioned, one aspect of it, is that to be efficient, to be satisfied, whatever action you take has got to in some way correspond to what seems to be your thinking of action. Now in the city, ordinary consciousness, you all have your own laboratory, you've got your own history book and your own nervous system up until now to know this. It's what seems to be the ambiguities, the indecisions of life, the frustration can absolutely be described as this, or I'm going to describe it and you can't disagree. Not unless you want me to sick the kid on you. Is they all entail this. And don't worry right now about where it came from. This apparent inner reality, this imagination, your own thought processes, your own thinking about what should I do about this situation, what could I do, what are my possibilities, what are my options, what are the alternatives. Whatever it is that you seem to do, no matter how tentative, no matter halfway be the little steps, how many fits and starts, there is no absolute parallel between any action you take and some decision in your thinking of action. If there were, then I could say to you that there is no such thing as incorrect action. It would not matter what you did as long as there was a distinct, a precise corollary, connection, parallel between whatever your thinking of the action was and whatever the action was. You remember some weeks back, I even pointed out about if you knew how to do it, you could take energy, possibilities, information from the E-pool, from areas apparently irrelevant to whatever you're trying to decide to do. And I made a little joke somewhat along the lines, it would be like deciding whether you're going to leave your second husband on the basis of whether the Dow Jones, the change in the Dow Jones average tomorrow ended in an even number, you would leave him. If it ended in an odd number, you'd stay with him for a while. That's on the basis that you're having trouble, or he's threatening to throw you out, or he's threatening to leave, or you keep thinking, I've had enough of this. And like everyone in the city, you Nixon actually never, very seldom, have enough of anything. Because if you did, there's no problem. If you absolutely had enough, it'd be like that you went into a store that were advertised, we make keys. And you go in, and as soon as you go in, they take a blackjack and hit you around the head. And by the time you can say, I only wanted to have it, and you reach for your keys, they hit you again. Let's assume that red circuit speaking, you're fairly sane. Could we assume that you would very shortly leave? That you would not stand there and think, well, while they're beating on it, and you trying to think, well, how bad do I need this key? Maybe they mistook me for someone else. Maybe it's a joke. Maybe I'm on candid camera. Let's just assume there would be no ambiguity on your part, that like all of your molecules in toto would agree. Without even discussion, let's split. So, no question, in a sense, it is no problem. You did not have to stand there and wonder, should I go? Should I stay? How bad? Where else will I have to go to get keys? Is this my fault? Was I asking for it? Does this person have psychological problems? Do they think they know me? Do they know me? Do I know them? Am I paying off some bad karma? I wonder what sign they are. All of it. Let's just assume there is no problem. You leave. This is what is never diagnosed in this way in the city. The ordinary human consciousness has never diagnosed it. That the problem, from an RA viewpoint, from a revolutionary viewpoint, from the viewpoint of this, there is no such thing as an individual problem for someone to say, look, I got this problem. I mean, it's personal. Let me tell you, you may have mentioned something about this in general, but I have a specific problem. There are actually players involved with this problem. Me, of course, for one, and then other individuals and their specific circumstances, like the chessboard of everyone's life, that I'm here and other people are here, and it's a personal thing. There is no such thing. The problem is this, that you don't know what to do. That's the only problem. The problem is not you and the other people. It's not you and the circumstance. It's not you and the relationship. The problem is always this. I don't know what to do. That's the problem. That's every problem. Well, I'm glad to see some of you hear this. How about this for curiosity, though? By the time you leave tonight, your mind's been wiped clear. That is the only problem. In my fictitious tale of going in to have keys made and somebody beat you up, that wasn't the problem. The problem was getting out. And therefore there was no problem, because I was assuming in my story that you were sane enough, you did not stand there and debate. You did not wonder what to do. There was no doubt what to do. Therefore there was no problem. All right, what I was pointing out that I know sounded very crudely that night, and I left it, that you could, if you knew how, you could draw in when you apparently have a problem. I can't decide, and of course the problem's always binary. There's no such thing as a trinary problem. It's binary problem. Should I do this or that? Should I go or stay? Should I tell them yes or no? That's always it, right? Sure, I'm right. So, if you knew what you were doing, you could literally use that which apparently is irrelevant. That the person says, all right, I've got to know, do you actually love me enough? Are we going to stick together forever? I mean, you've been acting funny lately. I want to know how you feel. All right, the problem, if there was a problem, if this was your case, the people in you, the people in your state, they could talk about all the various ambiguities, the uncertainties, the mixed emotions. But that's not the problem. The problem is you don't know what to do. And if you knew what to do, you'd say, well, yeah, you're right. We need to decide something. I got to go to the bathroom, man. You go in the bathroom and you take out a coin. You got to know what you're doing, and you've got to be fully committed to it. That is, you stand there and you decide, all right, heads, I stay with him. Tails, I tell him this is it. But you have got to be committed to it. You have got to decide. You have got to decide while understanding that I cannot decide. That's the problem. And I can go on debating it, which I have. My internal people is like a madhouse of some kind of deranged parliament. Half the people in me say, all right, let's stay. And by the time I turn my head and go to the bathroom ordinarily, it's like the other half have taken over. They say, no. We got to cut it out. Well, let's tell him, let's have a trial separation. Let's do something. I can't decide. That's the problem. If you couldn't decide and you knew what you were doing, then you take care of the problem in this way. Say, excuse me just a second, let me go to the bathroom. You go in there and you decide, of course it doesn't matter, heads I leave, tails I stay. And you flip, and wherever it is, and you come back out, and you flush the toilet, and you come back out, and you say, all right, and whatever it was decided. You have, if you knew how to do it for the time being, you have solved the problem. The problem was you couldn't decide. And so you did make a decision. Not to go or stay, you decided, as it appears, you decided I'll leave it to absolute chance. And if you knew what you were doing, this is all verbal and therefore it's imperfect, but you would have to look at it this way. And this is not it at all, but just to give you something to start with, you got to look at it this way. How much worse off am I? Well, I knew that'd happen, and I hate it, but we had to get that over with, because now let me point out, that is not the reality of the situation. That is not the full 3D or 4D reality of it. But that is not an unfair, very quick question. Is how much worse off are you? And the absolute truth is you're not worse off. Right. If we can bypass that and go a little further, you are better off. Except in the city, that is, sane, ordinary people would find this whole thing to be insane. You got to admit. If I were to try and tell ordinary people that, hey, the important decisions of your life, like your marriage, your relationship, when you're confused, don't go to a psychiatrist, don't go to a priest, don't go to a marriage counselor, don't go away and take separate vacations and think about it and meditate. Go flip a coin in the bathroom right now and decide. You know, in the city, they'd go, oh, hey, I don't have to decide. You need help. You know, you're nuts. And, of course, in the city, it is nuts. It is not the way things are done. It is not. And you know that. I know that. I'm not proposing it. It's never going to be done in the city. But I am telling you, until you can find out through feeling, it's not through an intellectual process, it is not through something I can directly teach you, no one can convey it to you just verbally. It's a feeling, it's a self-protection mechanism. But until you can find how to make your own thinking of action match your action. And here, again, it's insane in the city, but I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if already to you, you can't decide what to do in the situation. Here's what ordinary consciousness also cannot perceive. If you can't decide, then it doesn't matter. It seems to matter. It's supposed to seem to matter. And that ordinary consciousness will swear it does matter. If two guys sing at a bar and the guy says, my wife is driving me nuts, I think she's running around on me, I don't know what it is, I just feel like I can't stand this anymore, and his buddy says, have another beer, won't you leave her? The guy says, you're right, I found out I'm going to. And he goes to the bathroom, he has another beer, he says, Jesus, I can't leave her. No, I can't, no. Apparently, he cannot decide, but also apparently, it's one of the most important situations and questions in his life. But you've got to see. You've got to have the ability to begin to glimpse. it is really not that important, or the son of a bitch could decide. It wouldn't be a question. If it was literally, listen, she means everything to me. Without her, I'm nothing. Well, that's a case closed. If that be true, and she says, well, you're going to have to shave your head and lose 30 pounds and grow 2 inches, you'd say, done. Give me a week. When I'm right, I'm right. Something is amiss in the 4D world, even the 3D world, that everyone believes, as they should, that I am faced here with a most pressing problem, the answer to which I can't decide. I mean, there are only 2 possibilities, but I cannot decide. The situation is not pressing. It is not important, or there wouldn't be a problem. That is, remember, I'm reminding you, the problem is not to do this or that. The problem is you can't decide what to do. So if it was really that important, you would never get to the point of there being a problem. You would not be in the key shop being beaten about the head deciding, do I need a key bad enough to stand here and get killed? If indeed you could not live without him or her, there is no question about, well, what'll I do? You do whatever the hell it takes. All of that requires that if you're doing it without what appears to be tricks, such as flipping coins and listening to me try and push you chemically in a certain direction, it has to be that you are able to formulate a plan, that is, thinking of action, that you can act on. And if you understand that, I'm telling you correctly, that it doesn't matter what you do. Or conversely, it doesn't matter what you plan to do, which is why flipping a coin will work. It just, in that case, apparently, though, chance took it out of your hands. And I guess some people would have segments of your population would say, well, now that's no way to run the serious parts of your life. So, okay, it's not. Decide. If it's true, then you decide what to do. And you say, well, I can't. I need more time. I need more information. All you need is the ability to make your action fit your thinking of action, or to make your thinking of action fit your action. But they've got to fit. And if they fit, now, well, many of you have been through this in instances that surprised you, and I didn't describe it at the time. When that happens, there is no question whatsoever. There's no question going off at right angles of what I did. Did I do right? That's when it is like the cleanest and keenest of scalpels, that you can cut something, you make a decision, and you walk away. And under passing conditions, as Kyroots pointed out, a revolutionist out in the bush could be full of sleep, even full of shit, but full of memories? Never. The only people that are full of memories are those people that cannot make a decision, which constitutes well over 99% of the world's population, as they're supposed to. If everybody made decisions, good grief. I don't even want to think about it. If everybody just decided what to do and just walked off, that'd be it. The problem is not the problem. The problem is you can't decide what to do. The problem is you're human. The problem is you're laboring under the weight of cityfied consciousness. The problem is you do not know how to look after yourself in the sense that I've been talking about the last few weeks, or hinting about, that sounds crude and unmystical, the way I did it intentionally, of saying you got to learn how to look after number one. To look after number one is to have your actions fit your ability to plan actions, or to have your ability to plan and think about your actions fit whatever actions you seem capable of taking. It doesn't matter. One way is as good as the other, to look at it from one direction or the other. If you can do that, you are looking after yourself. You're hurting no one else. It's not possible. It's not at anyone else's expense. You should be able to look at efficiency, if you want a description. It is being able to make the maximum moves toward purpose with a minimum expenditure of all resources. And the general expenditure of resources, that is your energy in life, is what? Indecision. You call it other things, you call it problems. But now a bunch of you heard me 7 minutes ago. It's not the specific thing it seems to be a problem. That's not the problem. The problem is you can't decide what to do. The things that seems to be the specific circumstances or problems, they're interchangeable. They might as well be circuit boards. You just change, it's not the problem. Apparently you got a problem, a vocational problem, a problem at work, then you've apparently got a problem with your family life or your mate, then you've probably got another problem with your children, then you've got another problem with your financial relationships with your mortgage company. You have apparent problems with your mother and father if they're still alive. But that's not it. You can shift, you can change one of those, it doesn't matter once you understand it. The problem in all the instances that I just named and any other that you could make up or that could happen to you, the problem is in any of those situations involving you and those other people, those kind of relationships, the problem is there's something going on that seems to demand a decision on your part and you cannot decide what to do. That's the problem. The problem is not what your wife said, what your mother said, what your boss says he expects of you. That is not the problem. The problem is you can't decide what to do. So if you could make your action fit into any kinds of thinking of action you can do, or vice versa, then whatever you did would be correct. And it truly, as strange as this sounds, or as metaphysical as it may sound, or some of you hope it sounds, to say that all action's the same, that doesn't matter. Jack, it's a fact. You got to know how to do it. You can't theorize it. You can't play like, you can't go and have your name legally changed to Zen and believe, well, now I can do it. Now all action's the same. I'll karate chop reality in some way. No, it's just that you can act on the basis that it absolutely coincides, at least in the 4D world, with what you're capable of thinking about action. And when that happens, you can do anything. Anything. Not fly through the air, that's not even important. Raise the dead. No, I'm talking about the real stuff. Is you can do something. And if you don't really know what to do, you got the ability, if it came to it, is simply go in the bathroom and say, wait, all right, I'll have a decision for you in a minute. I've been thinking about this for the last 2 months. If I got to go to the bathroom, I'll be right back. And you go in the bathroom and you flip a coin, or whatever it is, but you got to do it. You got to decide to do it. All right, heads, I tell them yes, tails, no. And you flip, and it comes out, and you go out, and you say, well, after thinking about this, after discussing with all my friends, whatever you want to tell them, after praying on this, after meditating on this, I have decided the answer is no. That's it. There is no problem. That's the end of all problems. That's the end of this side of the table. Well, inasmuch as we were being lighthearted with not only Kyroot, but that little one-act play in 4 acts, we're being lighthearted, if not facetiously imaginative. Let me pick up some more of the story about these creatures at another time, another place, where most of the stuff was about like it is here. Remember that last story, Act 4, with the one-act play. I stalled around the first side of the tape like I didn't hear that or wasn't going to respond. I heard it. So let's continue with that on this side of the tape. If there was this other place, you remember, where most of the stuff was about like it is here, and you had some creatures that turned into beings that had the ability to picture stuff, that seemed to have the ability to operate as though there were two realities of some kind in here and then, oh, that reality. You know, that sort of thing. Just in general. Just take what that story was, sort of. Best I can remember it. That was the first time I'd heard it, too. But in this place, in this other place, I want you to think about this. And I'm just going to describe what goes on in this other place with the same kind of terms that we would use here. Like imagination, just regular imagination, daydreams, but imagination, that kind of reality. In this other place, let me point out to you, in this other place, imagination should in no wise be dismissed or downplayed. Because what it furnished in that other place would be a most efficient reflection of the ultimate contrast of I want. It not only furnishes the ultimate contrast, but it's always available. It never fails. It is an always at-hand personal contrast. And to think, I bet some of you would believe that even in this other place, that imagination is the kind of thing that would really submits itself to bad-mouthing, especially from those that would be mystically inclined. What could be worse? Just people, just everyday people, their damn little imagination running wild with them. People that can't seem to even differentiate between actual reality. You know, the joke, that little story, the person went, oh, you mean that reality? And of course, we know that's the reality. That kind of reality, and just for, God knows what, the kind of things that people imagine. There may or may not be a relationship. But in this other place, what I want to tell you, that attitude is incorrect. Imagination would be getting an extremely undeserved, to say the least, bad rap. The possibilities of the classic contrast is a feeling of a personal, individual sense of reality. And, oh, you mean that other reality? There is the classic contrast. And what makes this possible? Imagination. Were it not for imagination, there would not be in you the manifestation of the classic contrast. There are all sorts that I can mention, but that is the classic. That there is a reality out there, that is the classic. That there is a reality out there, I mean, there's no doubt, everybody talks about it, maybe we can't agree right now, but there is one. And then there is, it's like my perception. Everybody has individual perception, a little bias built in, small amount of prejudice, some flawed perception somewhere in the past that makes this less than a fully clinical sense of reality. So that everybody is walking around with a kind of sense of reality that is to more degrees and to less degrees in sync with the reality. There is the classic contrast. All other contrasts can be fitted into that if I wanted to, since it's my idea. But they could be. Every other contrast can fit in to the apparent contrast of these two realities. The one in here and oh, you mean that one out there. And you could not do that were it not for imagination, for daydreams. And to think for thousands of years, everybody from doctors, physicians, philosophers, have badmouthed it. All you've had would be holy men. Strange people here and there will try to take up for it. But they don't take up for the situation of the contrast. They just say that as opposed to attacking this individual, so-called flawed, prejudicial sense of reality in here as opposed to the real one, that this one in here is the more important. So they're no better off. Without understanding the need for the contrast, then you're going to have favorites. You're going to believe that, yeah, one of them is the better reality. One of them is a better perception of reality than the other. And tut, tut, tut. No. Bad people. No. But in this matter in general, try and listen. In such a fictitious other place, let me expand this a little bit. Man's binary view, to even attack my own descriptions, or to use my own descriptions to make this point, of course, that what I've been referring to correctly is man's binary view, such as in the matters of humans in the city believing that there is an inner reality and then this other reality, or the approaching a classic, a semi-classic, is this great dichotomy of man being mind/body. Not two parts, not mind, feeling, and body, or mind, body, and cough drops, but always a binary view that man is mind and body. All right. This is oftentimes imagined to be, claimed to be, and some of you could believe that I've been a party to this, that this is seen as being a flaw. It sounds as though I've been describing it for weeks and months as flaws. The cyclopic view in the city, that people can only be aware of two samples of a binary arrangement, and then this kind of psychopic view, of course, believes that one is preferable. But still, they're always dealing with a binary basis of consciousness. And it sounds as though, as I've admitted, that I attack it. But, nay, nay. If this other place was seen correctly, if we were talking about another state, then the binary condition of human consciousness is not a flaw. It is rather a most efficient, minimal expenditure of energy to produce consciousness, because it is doing it at the very cheapest expense, that is, two samples, which is the minimum it takes to be conscious. To have a sense of smell only requires that you, at one time, smell two aromas. Not one. You can't smell just one. There's got to be at least two, and then you can say, truthfully, correctly even, in the city, I have a sense of smell, I know what it is. But notice, it only takes two. All you've got to have are two samples to be conscious in that particular area. Now, if any of you can follow this right quick, all you have got to have is binary consciousness, an awareness of two possibilities in human existence to be conscious. To believe that's a flaw, you don't understand efficiency. That is the height of efficiency. That life has expended the least amount of energy possible. And it made man conscious. All the way from scientists, PhDs from Stanford, to bricklayers, from the Pope to the atheist in the gutter, It is the height of efficiency. Binary contrast cannot in any manner be improved upon in the 3D world. Any of you who have the ability at all to ever become a real revolutionist, you should be able to see that. Go away and think about it until next time we meet if you must. It is the height of efficiency in all respects for man to be conscious in a binary manner as I've described it. To only see the possibility of there being good and evil. No third part. Fuck all that idea about E and all that. At anything that lends itself to being judged either good or evil, you don't have to be a Baptist, a Methodist, a Catholic. You don't have to be religious. If there's a right way to do something, then there is that right, good way, and then there's the wrong way, the evil way. That's it. All right, if we get out of the field apparently as somewhat metaphysical and get into the physical field. If there is a scientific fact having to do with motion, thermodynamics, if there is a fact, if this is true, then by God it's true. And that which doesn't fit this description, this law, is not true. In other words, all things in human existence that lend themselves to being classified as a scientific fact, then the fact is either true or false. All right. Now I know it can sound as though, which it is true, that for revolutionary purposes this is inadequate. The word inadequate, of course, doesn't begin to cover it. You can't even study in that field. That's got nothing to offer. But you should realize that you are grossly mistaken if you believe that that is a flaw in the operations of the city. That is the height of efficiency of life producing in man consciousness while expending the least amount, the minimal amount of energy on its part to produce 2 samples, and only 2. It's not a mistake. It is not a shortcoming in human consciousness for me to say, for you to imagine I've said as a dogmatic, all-inclusive statement that, hey, humanity is on the wrong track, only believing that things either got to be good or evil, either right or wrong, sweet or sour, off and on, up or down, that boy is that limited. To be really sophisticated and to be some kind of enlightened being like I am, you've got to go way beyond that. That's a mistake. That is something humanity's got to outgrow. That's just some kind of faux pas along the steps of evolution. Nay. It is the height of efficiency. I'm telling you, I'll give you till next time. You figure out a more efficient way to get the maximum return. That is, to get men conscious in the way in which we're conscious, just leave it at that for the time being, to get us there with the minimal expenditure of energy. And the minimal expenditure is to make it where a man can be conscious based upon only 2 samples. That is it. You can go away and you can think in a topographical manner all you want to between now and the next time we meet, and you cannot find a way to make that more efficient because you can't cut it to 1 sample. You can't smell 1 smell. You can't think 1 thought. There's got to be 2. But if you've got 2, then you're conscious. That's all it takes. The binary view, hence, binary consciousness, hence, is not a flaw. It's not a false step. It's not a shortcoming. It is efficiency personified. It's efficiency in motion. Now these kind of creatures that I'm just lightheartedly speculating on in this other place, try and listen to this, because this is what some of you were already hearing. They do not perceive a 3rd sample. That is what I've been referring to as the E possibility, the E pool, the E force. They do not perceive it. for one simple reason that you won't expect. You got to listen. Because it is irrelevant. They will never perceive it. It is irrelevant. But it's not simply irrelevant to any apparent subject at hand. Question of good and evil, right or wrong, something being true or false. It's not irrelevant in relationship to any particular situation. But it is irrelevant to the real matter, which is producing two samples so that there will be the needed energy-producing situation of a binary contrast. To that, all questions of a third sample, a third possibility, E-force, all such questions literally, truly, are irrelevant. Always have been, always will be. People in the city are not suddenly one day going to say, oh my God, there's been a whole pool of information, of possibilities, of forces in action, of circumstances that we have not taken into consideration. It's not going to happen. They are not supposed to be taken into consideration. They're not necessary. They are truly irrelevant. That which is necessary for a revolutionist to undergo the shock to everyone else, to all ordinary operations of consciousness in life, the rest of this is irrelevant. It always has been, always will be. It's not a mistake. It's not something that life is slowly growing out of. It's irrelevant to the situation. And it doesn't matter what the situation is. I don't care what you could bring up. The matter of a third sample, which is what E-force would be, is irrelevant. Period. Because all that's relevant is having the minimal two samples, which creates a binary contrast, which in itself produces consciousness. Anything else, I'm talking about truly irrelevant. Don't make me stomp my feet and keep talking louder. It's truly irrelevant. It doesn't even enter into it. To be conscious requires two samples. That's it. Consciousness doesn't need any more. It's like you're overfilling the tank. It just doesn't take it. You got two possibilities, whatever they are. All right, things are either right or wrong. I either like this or I don't like it. You either agree with me or you don't. You either like me or you don't. Whatever it is, that is all that is pertinent. That is all that is relevant. That is all that is necessary. Anything else, what I've been describing as E, and laughingly at times saying let the E stand for irrelevant. It's not laughingly. It truly, absolutely is irrelevant. Not to the particular situation, not to a question about is there good and evil. That's no more pertinent than to say, are more things in life sour or sweet? The apparent situation is not in question. It doesn't matter. It's meaningless. The only thing that is meaningful is it takes two samples to be conscious. That is the most efficient way. That is the most efficient expenditure. The minimal expenditure of energy is to produce two samples and to make that the basis of consciousness as it is. Anything else, any other possibility is irrelevant to any situation. That's the part that's almost impossible to hear with hearing molecules, because the system is constructed to want to grab onto this like everything else and to say, well, wait, let's apply this to specifics. Or surely there's an exception I can already feel or think of. So you miss the point. None of the situations are pertinent. The pertinence in question is two samples are needed to be conscious. Two and no more. Anything more than two is you're trying to put a quart's worth of info and energy into a pint bottle. And you can go ahead and pour it. But once the pint is full, that's it. The pint bottle doesn't know that there's any more going anywhere. It doesn't know it's being wasted. When it's full, it's full. When the minimal requirement of there being two samples is fulfilled, you are conscious. To ordinary consciousness, that is the beginning and the end, the alpha, the omega, that covers the full spectrum of any possibility. And to say that anything left is irrelevant, that's almost irrelevant. It is just non-existent. It is irrelevant, no matter the situation. As long as two will produce a contrast, a third is absolutely always irrelevant. It's unnecessary. It does not come into play. It will not become part of consciousness. It is not taken into account. It is of no account. If two will produce the contrast, no one needs a third. The third is irrelevant, and all ordinary states, all ordinary cities, the general population, the ruling powers in all other states and cities, when the two will produce contrast, there's no third necessary. And if you thought there was a third lurking about, no one will see it. It is truly irrelevant. In this same fictitious place where a lot of stuff is like here, except, of course, these differences that I'm using as a springboard, let me point out some other things about contrast. And using the basis of the stories tonight, also reminding you that contrast can be seen as one of the facilities to produce energy. That you've got to have contrast. You've got to have more than one sample. You've got to have two things. You've got to have whatever you want to call it. Positive and negative current apparently operating in contrast. You've got to have in more apparent humane areas, you've got to have questions of good and evil, or people wouldn't do anything. Areas of more apparent scientific yellow circuit activities, you've got to have truth and falsity, or else science wouldn't move. The apparent progress, the march of knowledge would not take place. There apparently is always the friction, the struggle between good and evil, right and wrong, up and down, this and that, positive and negative, weak force, strong force. But in this place that this fictitious land we're talking about, with some resemblance to here, let me point out something else, that the more intense, that is, the more energy producing, is a contrast, such as, I'll give you some examples: murders, wars, sex. Not that I'm comparing sex with murders and wars, but take murders and wars, since they seem to be pretty offensive to most people. Take that as being an extreme contrast. Is one being apparently taking the three-dimensional life of another one, or large numbers attacking others. The more extreme, that is, the more energy production is going on, the more energy transfer is going on. The more extreme is the contrast, the more the situation is inclined to consume the participants. At times, even bystanders consume them. And I don't mean just that it takes their life away, it can drain them, that they apparently become devoid almost of energy to move for hours, days. They may claim it's affecting them years later, that they've just lost the will to live. The intensity of the contrast. Now, along those lines, let me point out something else. Throughout history, you've had the so-called holy men attempting, they didn't know how to analyze it, it's never been described in this manner, but what they're attempting to do by many of their so-called methods is they're attempting to avoid contrast, at least extreme contrast. They don't know how to explain it. They attribute it to trying to worship gods, or they believe that some prophet in the past said this and that, or they believe spirits told them to get out of the city. But what is it they're doing by attempting to live lives, as they call it, of contemplation, of abandoning civilization, getting out of the rat race, living in silence, living off by themselves in little groups, or living off as a hermit, alone, refusing to engage in work, refusing sex, to get involved sexually. From one view, one correct view, what is all that? It's an attempt to avoid all contrast, to smooth all this out, to turn it all into white bread, to turn it all into a kind of cottage cheese existence that, even if I, right quick, I can say that it would almost be impossible to avoid any contrast, because you'd have to give up breathing in and breathing out, for one thing. That's one contrast. You'd have to abandon that, and you know where it goes from there. It's downhill after that. So look at it as these kind of holy men, not only out there, but in you. Many of you got little would-be holy men and women in you, in your population. And you had dreams of someday running away and joining a monastery or some commune somewhere where everyone held hands in the morning and they sang songs and they all hugged each other and no one spoke harshly. Maybe no one spoke. Look at it. It is an attempt, it is a belief, it is a dream of being somewhere that almost all the harsh, the extreme contrast are smoothed out. Instead of things being black and white, everything becomes gray. Instead of things either being real noisy or frighteningly silent, maybe just take some kind of a steady pink noise background hum. But it's like an abandonment, like a suppression, like an escape from extreme contrast. I would submit to you that the more that the people are wired up to play out the roles of holy people, what they're really dreaming of is, literally, the eradication of all contrast, which is what? Death, or, from their viewpoint, paradise. Dreams of heaven. No conflict, no one argues. There is no difference between men and women, between the races, between nationalities. We're all, and then of course they won't say one. What they're saying is we're all without contrast. Along these same lines, let me point out something else. It'll come as a surprise once you hear me start. A lot of you will think you're going to jump and know what I'm going to say. The more dramatic, the more extreme seems to be certain binary contrast in people, such as the picture of the very unphysical, clumsy, inept intellectual. Right. Typical, dumb, prejudicial archetype, right? Or how about this, the almost non-thinking, the almost non-intellectually functioning athlete. When you got there and he can play linebacker and you ask him his name and he has to look in his coat. Seems to be so stereotypical that it should be condemned, or it's laughable. Nay, nay. Not laughable. The more extreme, the more dramatic can seem to be such binary contrast. Here's the strange part, is the more that men, at least in the city, seem to be able to see and to accept the reality of types. In other words, you may think that there is a condemnable or a stupid part of archetypes, stereotypes. That is, hey, all intellectuals are not clumsy. All you got to do is feel it's already down your nervous system. When you hear or when you see portrayed in a movie or somebody else conveys to you a story about, hey, talk about dumb, forgetful, harebrained intellectuals. You know, Dr. So-and-so that won the Nobel Prize, I had a class from him at MIT. That son of a bitch, almost every week would break a finger, a toe. He was always falling down. And this has got nothing to do with climate, environment. You did not pick this up. Humans will laugh because they recognize, they appreciate. It is meaningful. The more dramatic is the contrast that they do know that is exemplary. And they don't know why. You're not supposed to know why, it just is. But the more somebody is intellectual, the greater is the contrast between that, back to one of the classic aspects of the binary view, that is the great dichotomy between mind and body. That's the division. That's what's believed in the city, always has been. They have scientific proof for it, they have psychological proof for it. And so in this case, the more that a man seems to have devoted his life to developing the brain, the clumsier he is, through lack of attention to the body maybe, or maybe that's just the way it is. But what I'm telling you, it is not some kind of completely groundless, prejudicial, mechanical, stereotyping. It is efficiency in action again, because people correctly see it and they accept it. It is meaningful. It is telling. It tells more if a man knew how to analyze it. Just then, laughing when they describe, when somebody says, "You heard of Dr. So-and-so? Some bitch, the first day I had class with him, he come walking in and he said, 'Hello,' and he tripped and fell down and broke his nose." To the average person in this city, that tells them more about how intellectual that man was. The great contrast in the dichotomy between the mind and the body, than hearing that he won 3 Nobel Prizes. You don't have to hear him more. Or to hear, hey, they interviewed the new guy that they just drafted up the university here. Found out, when he was their first, they tried to get him out of high school, they just found out he has to have help to write his name. 19 years old. That's all you got to hear. You immediately assume, you'll accept the fact just immediately, that son bitch, I bet, is murder on the field. You just know he is. And it seems to be some kind of, at least partially, ill-founded exaggeration. And it's not. It's just an extreme contrast. And the more extreme it is, the easier people in the city can see it and accept it. Speaking of efficiency, I can point out that from another view, this is not the basic one, but from another aspect of contrast, is that it improves mechanical perception. It is like a continuing availability of shorthand, such as the examples I was just throwing out at you that many of you finally began to laugh. That little quick chuckle is extreme contrast, or contrast in general. Part of the purpose is out in life it keeps people from having to stop and apparently plot, plan, analyze everything that happens. It's what oftentimes passes in some circles as being condemnable stereotyping, shorthand, prejudicial comments. It's not. It's shorthand. And it's not ill-founded. That's why the contrasts are contrast. For people in the city, which of course people in the city are in a hurry, got to be. People in the city, they don't have time to stop and examine every little thing. And so from one view I'm saying you, part of the purpose of contrast is you can just glance around and you took it in, you got it. You just hear a couple of words, if somebody describes something, yeah, I got it. You just glance around as your limo passes by, the taxi, and you just get a glance. Somebody says, did you see so-and-so? Do you know what's going on there? And already you can fill in the blanks. Yeah, I know. Contrast. Without it, the city would, everything would fall apart. It'd come to such a grinding halt. You couldn't operate. yet another of life's master strokes, at least in this area of this place, if it existed, that I am facetiously speculating upon. Another aspect in such a place of life's master strokes would be in this place that there'd be divisions of all energies, divisions of feelings, of thoughts, the impressions one had of life, of the apparent reality in here, and even of, yes, stuff. But this division, the masterstroke view that I was going to give you, was life coming up with this division of, and here it is, mine and thine. As it's called, I guess, in the legal profession, the concept of private ownership. It's a masterstroke. Masterstroke. Without it, we wouldn't have the ever popular things such as landlords. You wouldn't have the chance at some sporting activity such as shooting a trespasser. Being able to say, no you don't, that's mine. One more thing about contrast. In such a place, there was such a place, and there was still an aspect of a would-be revolution going on outside the mainstream of their city life. Then in such a fictitious place, the revolutionists there if they ever seem to be expending any energy in what seemed to be a struggle between themselves and the old guard, the old ideas, the established powers and beliefs in the city, the only reason that a revolutionist there would apparently be engaged in such a struggle would be this. It would be as though they were trying to furnish an initial flash of contrast that might act as a signal and thus attract new proper enlistees. But other than that, the belief, although it would have to have been unanalyzed, but the kind of belief or the kind of acceptance that this, even here, even in the fictitious place we're talking about, that this is engaged in some kind of struggle, somewhere along the line, of trying to straighten out these old, outdated, established, conservative, ill-founded, incomplete ideas. That's wrong. And yet, it starts out, and for many people, they believe it goes for a long time, that there is a struggle going on between this, and between my ideas and what's going on in life. And there's not. There can't be. There is no way to complete the ideas going on in life because they're not incomplete. They are beautifully complete. Their efficiency makes you look like a three-legged horse. There is nothing to complete. There are no errors for me to correct, for you to correct. There are not people with limited consciousness living in the city awaiting either me or someone's enlightening information. They don't need any more. Anything else is irrelevant. Anything. They've got all they need, and they don't have all they need on some theoretical basis that they're kind of blind. They got two good eyes. They see two samples the same as you do. And that's all that's needed. There can be no real struggle, and the only reason I bring this out I'm not going to tell you the reason, but I had a reason, of course. That when there appears to be, and there always appears to be, some kind of struggle going on between new, revolutionary, strange information and the established, old guard, the established, old, accepted ideas. But when it is truly a revolution, a burgeoning revolution, a potential revolution, there is no really such struggle. But there has to be this kind of initial fireworks going. There has to be the apparent initial clash between the two. Or else those who might have the potential to be regular army, they'll never know about it. They got to hear what and see what appears to them to be some kind of conflict going on. That I might belong over there. Where else does a soldier belong? But once you get there, once you begin to show any signs of being able to get out of boot camp, you got to understand that things in the city are operating at the height of efficiency. They can't be improved upon. And you will be astounded, you'll be delighted when you see it on your own. You remember, we're talking about this other place. Well, before we wrap up this fairy tale side of the tape, I'm going to give you one more approach toward this foolish possibility of binary consciousness, contrast. That human consciousness, under all ordinary conditions, can only know, can only see relationships. Now I'm expanding in a certain right angle manner what I was pointing out to you in a fairly basic and sensual way, that you cannot have one taste. If you only tasted one thing, you've got no sense of taste. Literally. You couldn't talk about it. It would make no sense to you. You've got to taste what? That's all it takes. Not. That's all it takes. Then you can start switching them. But it always is based upon two samples. Even if you never had any more, if you just had those initial two, then you got a sense of taste. That kind of contrast. Now I'm trying to, here at the end, as long as we're talking about fictitious places and fictitious possibilities, to take you off at a fictitious right angle, to expand on it a bit. Instead of just calling it a contrast, instead of leaving it at what might appear to be a fairly basic physical, sensual level, let me include all of human experience, all that you could feel, think, imagine, apparently actually experience. It would all be on the basis of relationships. That is, you could have no actual consciousness of one thing. Anything. A tree, unless it had some relationship. Unless you turned around and you saw a tree and then a not tree. You would never know what a tree is. It would have to be that, oh, there's a tree and I wonder what that. And the person says, that is a turtle. Ah! Now you've got a tree and a turtle. But you would not ever had a tree. Human consciousness cannot see, cannot be aware of a thing. It has to be a relationship. And the relationship only requires, guess what? How about my old equation? I plus not I equals everything. You thought that covered everything. It does, but it's only two things. I and everything is not I. That equals everything. So we're talking about I as some kind of imagined objective reality, and then everything that's not I, everything out there. Or if we were talking about my internal picture and imagination is flawed and prejudicial and as imperfect as it may be, my impression of me, and then me as I am, whatever that may be. The equation has only two samples in it. To be able to conceive of human life, to be able to conceive of yourself as being a conscious creature, requires a consciousness of relationships, and it only requires this in number. This won't do it. You could not be conscious of a tree. You could not be conscious of another human. You could not suddenly be conscious, if you're a man, of a woman. There would have to be another person. There would have to be a relationship that, you could not be conscious of simply a tree. If you just turn around and your consciousness included nothing but this tree, nothing else, it's just a tree, there is no way that you would ever know the tree. You would not literally, you would not even be conscious of it. There would have to be the relationship between that and at least one other thing. And then you could be conscious of, a tree. And of course, and the other thing then. And so then you move from there. Human consciousness is not of things. It's of relationships. That's all it can be. It is consciousness of processes, not objects. That is man's universe. That is the field, the beginning and the end, the totality of ordinary consciousness. It is processes, it is contrast, it is relationships. And I, for one, was act number 4 of the one-act play, if you remember. That Act 4 said that she thought that there were several things of interest, or one primary thing of interest there at the end of that story. That the contrast, the processes, the relationships themselves, as they were seen by human consciousness, as they could be perceived in human consciousness, that they were of no consequence. The only thing of any consequence, the only thing of any importance is the fact that there are contrasts. What the contrasts are, no importance. Wouldn't that be a weird place? And yet, since these creatures work for a secret master, and the story, if you remember, said that we all do. Who knows? Who knows what the story meant? It was talking about somewhere else. But if there was some kind of unseen hierarchy, and we're all beasts of burden to somebody. Of course, I don't mean us, I'm talking about these creatures in this other place. The interesting aspect, the way I understood the story to go, was that contrast, I think he would start out calling them conflicts, but contrast, relationships, or whatever, between north and south, sweet and sour, wet and dry, tall and short. That these kind of contrasts, even these relationships, produce friction. They are a means of transferring energy. And that according to the story, the way I understood her to say it, was that these creatures in that place, for them to continue and do their share, do their part in this continuing conflict, which is a form of energy transfer, they had to believe that their involvement in these individual, particular, overall contrasts and conflicts were important. Well, such as, regardless of some of my smart-aleck comments, if we were in this other place, regardless of all my cynicism and my snide remarks, questions of the battle between good and evil, I mean, that's important when you get down to it, regardless of what I say, right? In this other place, the way I understood the story to be indicating was that none of that was any of importance. The only thing of importance was that there were contrasts. What they were called was of no importance, except those involved believed. They had to believe, or they wouldn't stay involved with them. I found that interesting. I don't know whether you did. Well, not only I find it interesting, it made me, of course, thankful that it was just a story. What a relief